Hello, everybody. Welcome to our channel, Scientology, Peeling the Onion. My name is Mark Fisher, and I'm here with my co-host.
G'day, everyone. I hope you're having a good day.
What's your name?
My
What's
name
your
is
name?
Janis Grady.
That's right.
Yeah. Anyway, my day didn't start out well, but it's good now.
Yeah. Well, we're going to do this this video here. We want to welcome you to our channel. We've changed the name of our channel to, we've shortened it down from Our Scientology Stories Peeling the Onion down to Scientology Peeling the Onion. And I wanted to show everybody here, basically our YouTube channel. Okay. And you can see we've changed the banner, Scientology Peeling the Onion. And then I wanted to show everybody that, we have playlists of all the different videos that we've done, like past live streams, introductory videos, Mark and Janis's personal stories, interviews that we've done with various people over the last year. And then this one here I wanted to show is Hubbard and his Messengers, because this is part 8 of this series, and we're getting close to wrapping it up. But if you want to watch the earlier ones, they're here on this playlist, and you can see them all here. You can watch them in any order that you like, but you can go ahead and continue to watch this one and then go back and watch the other ones too. It's not going to be any problem. But we've also got one on the Free Wins playlist, and David and Shelley Miscavige and Tom Cruise. So anyway, we wanted to let you know that that's our website there, our YouTube site, sorry, and that we would really appreciate it if you would subscribe if you haven't already to our channel. And you'll see lots of great stories, lots of great history, and things like that. So anyway, I wanted to point that out to everybody here before we get started, because this is Hubbard's Messengers Part 8. And where we left off on Part 7, Janis, I think, was you were leaving from Los Angeles in, what is it, 1977 or whatever? And
yes.
heading back to Clearwater. Is that right?
No, actually 1976, heading back to Clearwater.
Okay.
Yeah, and the good introduction, Mark, on what we've covered and everything. So that's nice. Let me just. In the late 76, Beta got shut down. Terry and Jerry were sent back, and I
remind everybody what Beta is. Remind everybody.
Yeah,
what Beta
I will. But Terry and Jerry got sent back to Clearwater, and Beta was a relay unit of messengers, myself, Jill, and Lois. Jill Goodman and Lois Jory later became Riesdorf. We were then, Jill and I went back to Clearwater, and Lois went to LaQuinta, where they were setting up winter headquarters, WHQ. And LRH had the Guardian's office finding him the property located out in LaQuinta next to Indio, Palm Desert, Palm Springs area in California. And so LRH at that time was also pulling messengers to get that set up. And meanwhile, Jill and I went back to Clearwater. Terry and Jerry were already there. They were sent back to restart the RPF because of Jerry calling Nikki a black witch or a bitch, which one or the other. And then Terry got pulled out, and the two of them got in trouble for stupid reasons while the Guardian's office was hiding Mike Meisner, who was about to go to the government and spill the beans on all the criminal activity the U.S. Guardian's office had been doing. So I go back to Clearwater, and I become the commanding officer of the Commodore's Messenger Org, Clearwater. And I have different messengers under me: Shelley Miscavige, David Miscavige, Julie Catano, Fisher, Tanya Burden, Biddy Blythe, Biddy Miscavige. So, and we're doing investigations and sending up our proposed handlings to Hubbard on what to do with the various organizations in Clearwater, the Scientology organizations. And he would send us down telexes, investigate this, or, different things, or he needed personnel to man up winter headquarters. So that also became my job, where I had to find people qualified to go there. And I would then, it was my job to send them off in the middle of the night. So I would just go and get them and book them on a flight. And at that time, you didn't need ID to get on a flight. So I just made up names and put people on the flights, and they just flew under the fake name with their ticket and arrived in California, where they were then taken by a car. Some of them, I hear stories of them being blindfolded to go to the location in LaQuinta. So this is how the LaQuinta winter headquarters is being set up, with me ripping people off from their jobs in Clearwater and sending them up there. And then I'd have to get some of them replaced, or they'd eventually be replaced. So meanwhile, my mother was, an evaluation was done on Celebrity Center by Harriet Foster. And all the information being used was information being sent in by the Guardian's office. And it was a well-known fact that the Guardian's office did not like Yvonne, my mother. She just, too many people went to her, loved her. She, she was what people thought a real Scientologist was. So the Guardian's office setting up investigation, and that was being used, and it was found there was some joker and degrader going on in Celebrity Center, and therefore it was Yvonne's fault that people were cracking jokes about Scientology. And she ended up being removed by this eval, not commented or anything, but removed as the commanding officer of Celebrity Center, Los Angeles, or Internet.
Do you want me to put up this photo, the first photo?
Oh yeah, there she is. Yeah. So I'm like, what first photo? Okay, yeah, so there she is, where while she was at Flag, she was then told she had to do the public relations course and study Hubbard's technology on PR, public relations. So she did that with Hubbard's personal relations office. And while she was there, because she was to set up a PR organization that's job was to get celebrities and feed them to Celebrity Center and deal with the celebrities that way, with Celebrity Center being run by now Chris Maney, was to service the celebrities that Yvonne was to get and send in. So she was at Flag while I was at Flag. So this was the first time we'd actually were working together or in the same location. And she would go and do her studies and I would do my work. And at nighttime, we'd go to my room and we would sit down and we would binge watch Elvis Presley movies. So I got to spend some special time with her. And this went on until April of 77, when the order came through for me to now report to LaQuinta. I'd already sent Shelley there. I'd already sent David Miscavige there and a couple of others. And I was told, now it's time for me to report to LaQuinta, which I wasn't happy about. I enjoyed my job in Clearwater and being away from the day-to-day yelling by Hubbard, as on the way he operated. And my mom was there, so I enjoyed that. Anyway, so off I go to LA and I get picked up and I refuse to wear a blindfold.
Do you remember who replaced you in Clearwater?
Biddy. Ann Rosenblum was supposed to, but within weeks she was then pulled up. But so Biddy ended up taking over and became the CEO of CMO Clearwater.
Okay. And you did not know where W was, right? In other words, like you were flying out to LA, but you didn't know it was in LaQuinta, right?
I did, because when I was at the relay office, when the Guardian's office was looking for the property, I had seen the telexes going through in the reports.
But they didn't know that, so they wanted to blindfold you to take you out there?
Exactly. But,
You said, I know where we're going, so you don't need to blindfold me.
Exactly. So I didn't have to get blindfolded. And anyway, when I got there, I finally got to see what it was like. And it was right next to the LaQuinta Country Club. And they had a golf course there. And there was nothing else there. The closest place was probably Circle K 10 minutes down the road.
And this is 1977?
This is April 1977.
Yeah, so you're right. Like LaQuinta was a nothing. It was desert town with a one resort, and it was a small resort. It's not even what it is today. It was much smaller.
Well, right. Well, it was a small resort, and then there was one main road, and there was maybe 5 houses there, and then another road down was a horse stable, and that was pretty much it. You know, except for Circle K 10 minutes away. So,
and then also there were lots of date fields, right?
Yes, there was lots of date fields. And that's what I'm going to cover. We'll go through the different properties there. But I want to say, go back to the date field.
Okay.
That is what the paths look like between the properties. So, and there was a lot of snakes. And we'd never dealt with snakes. We'd lived on a ship, and then we were in Clearwater. So, right. So the first thing I was told to go to town and get myself some boots. So I went to town and I got some boots. And the messengers, to get between the properties, we rode a bicycle. So we had bicycles to go back and forth between the properties on our message runs. So, and then we're all briefed on, how to deal with snakes, and there's snake kits in all the properties, and, how to get a razor blade out and cut it and suck on the venom if you get bitten. And,
Did you do you remember ever seeing one? Like, do you remember having them, when you were out?
Yes, because they would come out and just lay on the paths.
I see.
And I see them where I ride my horse. We have rattlesnakes out there in the desert.
Right. Yeah.
So anyway, and everyone dressed very Western country type thing. The guys had all grown their hair. Everyone was wearing jeans and vests and, plaid shirt type of look,
Trying to blend in with the locals.
Trying to blend in. There was no such thing as uniforms. Even in Clearwater, no one wore a uniform.
No, not then.
So you just got civilian clothes, and we used to go to the swap meet and buy our clothes there because we couldn't afford to go to a shop. So life there was very laid back in LaQuinta compared to the pressure in the higher service orgs. So I arrive and I go up and I say hello to Hubbard and let him know that I'm there. And he asked me, have you been briefed yet on what your next project is? I'm like, no, I thought I was coming here to go back on watches. And he said, no, that we have another project for you. Well, I was to go on a recruitment mission. I've never recruited a soul in my life. I'd lived on a ship, I'm now going out into the real world to recruit people. Well, I had to recruit trained auditors. And they were to be Class 6, which meant they'd done the St. Hill Special Briefing Course or above. So, okay, we get this list of everyone who had graduated from the advanced organization in LA. Go ahead, Mark. What's your question?
Yeah, I had a question just before you get into that. What was it like when you hadn't seen Hubbard in a while, and now you show up at LaQuinta and you go to see him to say hello, right? How does he greet you, or what does he say to you? Does he just say hello, or does he say hello, Janice, or good to see you, or is it just sort of matter of fact, like, oh yeah, here's somebody else coming in my office?
No, he's like, oh, hello, honey, welcome, He was very happy to see me. And I'd seen him 7 months before when he was at the location we called Astra, which was, a big apartment complex. I'd seen him there, which I'd mentioned in our last video. But yeah,
what did he look like? Do you remember what he looked like? Like, had he grown his hair long, or what?
His hair was long again. which like he had in New York, not quite as long, but it was, it was shoulder length, and his sideburns. And when he went out, he still wore a hat with fake colored hair. And he used to drive around the different properties. He had a Chief Cherokee, and by this time now, messengers were drivers. We could all drive, or most of us could. So we actually would drive him between the properties. And I'll go into that later on when I actually end up on watches. But right now, he wants me to go to LA and recruit some auditors because he wants to personally train them and, have some more trained auditors that he's trained to do his research and have them do the pilot auditing of whatever he comes up with.
Were these auditors to come up to to come to that LaQuinta location?
Yes.
Got it. Okay.
Right. So now while we're still talking about LaQuinta, we can go into the properties now, and we'll go back to my recruitment mission. So this here is Rifle. This is the property that LRH lived at. And you can see the swimming pool. And to the right of that, going this way, is what was called the guest house. And that's where
you're saying screen left, like down below?
Screen right. You see the swimming pool?
Yeah, I see the swimming
down
pool.
Below. Go to the right. You'll see a palm tree, and then to the right, that red roof there. That was the guest house, which had a bathroom, a bedroom, a kitchen, and another bedroom.
Got it.
The first room was Mary Sue's. The kitchen was where the messengers sat outside Hubbard's room. And Mary Sue hated it because she had no privacy. She'd just go into her room and no privacy because messengers were always sitting in the kitchenette.
Right.
So, and then you go to the main building, which is towards the middle of that photo.
Yeah.
And that's where LRH.
That's where LRH lived and worked?
Well, that's where he had his office because he lived in that guest house. He had his office. Mary Sue had her office. There was a messenger office. Nikki, Mary Sue's communicator, had an office. There was a kitchen and a dining room lounge. And that was in that main part of the building, which had a courtyard as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then at the top, is that part of your property too?
Yes. And that's called the That's called the stables, and all of LRH's stuff was stored in there. All his furniture, all his gifts and different things that, were on the ship, and wherever he went, those things went, except for the gun collection, which, as I told you, got left behind in Clearwater. And that's in one of the previous stories.
Right. Now this is Rifle here from down below.
This is Rifle here. I took this picture from the wall separating, and I took this actually in 2018 when Paul and I went back there and visited. So this is not how it exactly looked when Hubbard was there, but you can see on the left side there's a tree, and next to it you can see some blue and red. That is a door, and you go through that door into a courtyard, and immediately on the right was LRH's office.
Okay.
So now you had Rifle, and then there was 2 empty lots. And then you had Olives. This is part of Olives. This is the main house of Olives, and that's how it looks today, since after we all left, the LaQuinta Hotel expanded and purchased this property and purchased what we called Palms next door. So Olives is where the messengers, we had our office, and external comm was there. The small guardian's office was there at Olives. And there was a swimming pool there that we used to swim in and have fun at, which is now turned into a tennis court. So, yeah, this is Olives.
In the summertime, LaQuinta was hotter than even when we were at Gilman Hot Springs, right?
Right.
Like really, really dry desert heat, right?
Yes, it was very hot. And so what Hubbard did a schedule where we had like 6 hours at nighttime to sleep. And during the day, we'd have a siesta, 2 hour siesta or an hour, something like that. But I would, by siesta time, I'd go sunbathe or go swimming at the pool. And Pat Broker was there, and he actually taught me how to do gainers off the diving board.
Oh.
You know, that's where you run out and you go and you jump out and you flip backwards and then go in through with your feet.
Okay.
So I did a lot of practice on that during my siesta time.
You ready for the next photo?
Yes. Okay, so this is part of Olives, and this was called the bunkhouse. No, sorry, this was not the bunkhouse. This was the longhouse. And on the left was where the female messengers had their dorm. And then on the right was Suzette Hubbard's room. So her room was as big as the room all the messengers squeezed into.
That's wild.
Yeah, and that's the longhouse. Now, this is the door to the library. Inside the library was the messenger's men's dorm. And you go in there and there's all these beds, but you look up and it was just a library full of books that were left behind, you know, with the ladder that goes up to the rail that, you know, where you can pull more books. So that's where people like Mark Yeager, David Miscavige, Pat Broker, that's where they lived.
Let me ask you this: I remember the bunks in Clearwater. We went 4 high in a room. How high was it? Just 2 high?
Oh, only two. Only two
here. Okay. Oh, you guys lived in luxury then, because we were 4 highs.
Yeah, no, we didn't.
Whoever was up at the top on the 4 high, they literally had to be careful they didn't roll out of bed and kill themselves.
Yeah. Well, the only time I know of 3 high was in the RPF, which I'll cover in the next series, not this one. Okay. In the next one, not this one. But on the other side of the library was a kitchen, and then there was a breakfast living room, and Claire and David Rousseau, who were messengers, they lived there. That was their bedroom.
And they were married, obviously, so that.
And they were married. They had actually been the relay office in Washington, D.C. when Hubbard was in D.C. with Kimmer and Mike and Gail and Jim Dinkowski.
Were they the only married couple at this time in the Messengers? Just Claire and David?
Yeah, because, well, Pat was married to Trudy, and Trudy was still in Clearwater.
So he was.
Yeah. And Terry was married to Jerry, and Jerry had been external comm, but they were both now back in Clearwater in trouble. Otherwise, yeah, those were the only married messengers.
Okay, carry on. Do you want me to go to the next picture?
Yeah, go to the next picture.
I have to mute. Okay, so.
Yes, I understand. So now here, this is Palms, and Palms was relocated right next to Olives. So we would just walk through a gate that opened up between the 2 walls and go to Palms. And Palms is where the crew dining was, the crew kitchen, a lounge for the crew. And then upstairs was where Kimmer and Mike Douglas lived. And also Lois, when she got married, she and Gary lived up there. And then to the left, you can see that little building on its own. That's where my brother and his wife, Doreen Doe, lived. And behind that is the garage where the RPF ended up being located. But I'll cover that in a later series.
About how many people would you estimate were living at that property at that time? 30, 40? Maybe,
when I arrived, it was probably about 50 people there when I arrived. You know, there was Gary and Carmen Weesey.
Right.
Stu Moreau and Joan, you know, it was a bunch of people like that were already there.
Got it.
And yeah, and Mark Ferreira, and they were all there working pretty much on just fixing up the property. Now, Palms, you can see it's got those palm trees, and behind it was a tennis court.
Okay.
And the crew were out to use the tennis court. And from where I was standing to take this picture in 2018 used to be a swimming pool. And that was the pool that the crew used to mostly use and hang out in. And sometimes we'd go over to Olives, but Olives was a weird shape and had a diving board.
Okay. Now, let me ask you, so during this time period, Hubbard wasn't, we talked about this, he hadn't started doing movies or anything yet. So was he basically just the people were there fixing up the property, and then the messengers were tending to L. Ron Hubbard's needs and stuff?
Right. And he also was involved in trying to oversee management, because he'd been sending stuff to me on the Flag Service org and on the Flag Bureau and all that kind of stuff, doing investigations when I was down there in Clearwater. So he had his attention on that, but mostly it was on fixing up the properties and making it operational. Because before I even arrived, they managed to build a bunkhouse, and they had managed to renovate a bunch of the properties. And then there was a big flood. I'm happy I missed the flood, but everything was sandbagged, and the basement of Palms was flooded, and everything had to be lifted up and all cleaned out. So I managed to miss all that.
Okay. Next picture is the date trees again. Do you want to see the date trees again?
Yes, because that was to remind me that one of the properties, there was palms and then olives, and then there was alfalfa fields. And then going the other direction, there was what we called the ranch house and the bunk houses and some more stables, and then the date packing plant, because these are all date trees. So the date packing plant was turned into a recording studio. And we talked about that. We talked about that in our interview with Tom DeFore, because that's where Hubbard was doing recordings, voiceovers, and also editing different tapes and that type of thing. So the date packing plant was turned into a recording studio.
Right. Okay. Ready for the next one?
Yes. Okay, so this is Clarice Barnett, Shelley's older sister, and we all called her CB. She ended up she was at Beta first, and then she went to Astra, and then to LaQuinta. She'd been on the ship since 1970 as a messenger. So this is just to establish who was at LaQuinta when I arrived. So CB was there.
And you've known Clarice, as we covered in earlier videos, since you were a child, right, in England, right? Her family rented a room from you guys when you were in St. Hill, right?
Her mother and her estate rented a room from us, yes, at St. Hill. And so I've known Clarice since I was 10 years old.
Right.
And she's the same age as me. And that's a picture of Dee Dee. Dee Dee and Clarice were like best friends.
Yeah,
and
give the
this
full
is
name.
Diana Riesdorf, Dee Dee. Yeah, so they took these pictures of each other at LaQuinta.
Uh-huh.
And you can see there's a fruit tree behind her. There's probably an orange tree or something.
Yep. And she's a future commanding officer of the Commoner's Messenger Org and the first Watchdog Committee chairman, right?
That's correct. Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
And there's Claire and DR, David Rousseau and Claire Rousseau.
Right.
And they're the ones who were the communications relay unit in DC while Hubbard was there. And then they drove out to LaQuinta and took their messenger positions again. But David actually was made the commanding officer of the winter headquarters in order to manage and get everything fixed up for Hubbard. And Claire stood the messenger watches with Dee Dee and Clarice. And there's Gail. Gail had been on the ship. She was Mary Sue's assistant steward. She's Dee Dee's older sister.
Gail Riesdorf, right?
Gail Riesdorf.
I don't mean to correct you.
No,
She knows them all by their first names, but our viewers don't know who they are.
And I appreciate you correcting me, so thank you. Okay. So that's Gail Riesdorf. She's Dee Dee's older sister. Mm-hmm. And she had been Mary Sue's assistant steward on the ship. And then when we were in Clearwater, she was pulled out early and went to DC and worked with Hubbard there as a cleaner, cleaning, his rooms and stuff like that, and helping Kimma. And then when she came to LaQuinta, she became a messenger. And she was already familiar with Hubbard, having been around Mary Sue and then with Hubbard in DC. So she became a messenger at that point.
Did she ever say what it was like cleaning rooms for Hubbard, like when she was steward?
Yeah, you know what? When he was in DC, he didn't have his allergy fits like he did on the ship. And he was, okay, honey, thank you. And he did, and he sat down and he ate with everybody. It was a very different environment with four of them in Hubbard.
Dust everywhere, and I smell perfume everywhere.
No.
Yeah.
Not at all. He did that on the ship, and he did that in LaQuinta, and he did it, everywhere else. But when he's with a small group, he didn't act up like that.
Okay.
And so here's Lois. Lois had been with Jill and I in LA at the relay unit Beta. And then Lois Jory. and she went to LaQuinta. And while there, she ends up marrying Gary Riesdorf, Dee Dee and Gail's older brother. And this is Kimma helping her get ready for her wedding. And I wasn't there yet. Kimma Douglas. Well, Kimma Dunleavy, Kimma Douglas.
Okay.
she was like the mother to the messengers.
Right.
On the ship.
I'm only teasing you about the last names because Lois is known as Lois Riesdorf, right? Her maiden name was Jory. So you think that Lois and Gail and Dee Dee were all sisters, but really they were sisters, two sisters and a sister-in-law. So that's why.
Exactly. Exactly. And Lois's family they were very well known in Scientology in South Africa. Her mother had the biggest mission down there, Bronwyn and Neville Jory, and they gave Lois up at 13 years old to go to the ship.
Yep.
So here's Kimma.
Her sister years later, Jeray, worked for me when I worked for David Miscavige. So yeah.
Right. And so this picture is Gary Riesdorf on the left. He is the older brother of Gail and Dee Dee getting married to Lois. And his best man was Arthur Hubbard.
Ah. Looking dapper.
Yes, they look dapper.
Did they get married there at the base in LaQuinta at the W location?
Yes. Yeah, they did.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, and then this is the when Lois got married, this is the card that LRH wrote to Lois. Hang on, let me see if I can make this bigger so I can read it out. It's cut off at the top, but he's telling her to have a lovely wedding. He's sending her, I am sending you the evening watch to represent me. So that meant that the messengers who were with Hubbard in the evening while she was getting married, he let them go off watch to go and attend Lois's wedding. So he was pretty much, so he was pretty much on his own that evening while Lois was getting married, so that the messengers that were there could be at the wedding. And in front there, that's Dee Dee and Gail Riesdorf. And in the back is now Lois Riesdorf and Gary Riesdorf and Arthur Hubbard on the left. And on the right, that's Raj, or people called him Ralph. Ralph or Raj. One of them was his real name and one was his...
Kernbach?
Yeah.
Kernbach,
yeah.
I was going to ask, when messengers like Lois and Gary, when they got married, like Lois was a messenger, Gary was not at the time, but did Hubbard actually give them gifts or anything like that? Like, for a wedding gift, or was it just not, that's not what was done?
Yeah, no, wedding gifts were always given. Yeah, he did that with Annie and Terry and Trudy and me. All of us got wedding gifts from him. Yeah, the public relations always saw to that.
All right.
But When I bring up the name of Ralph or Raj, I think his real name was Ralph Kernbach and he went by Raj. And that's because everyone in LaQuinta had a fake name. And except the Messengers. I was Janice because that's how Hubbard knew me, but the Messengers would call me Jan. And so when we were out, it was Jan. And the idea was not to have us connected to Hubbard if someone recognized us in town.
Right, and that's how Mark Rathbun later became his Marty Rathbun, because that was his fake name, right?
Right, exactly. And yeah, so everyone had these fake names. There was Justin Stratman. His real name was Scott Stratman. And like Dick Stratman, his fake name was Link. So it was like you had to put it together.
Okay, here's the next one.
All right, this one is Pat and Trudy Broker. Trudy, I've forgotten why, but she ended up in the RPF, and Pat had gone on to LaQuinta. So they were separated. They were still married, but separated and supposed to still be married. So Pat was working in LaQuinta, and Trudy was in the RPF and in Clearwater, and it was expected once she finished, she would then join Pat in LaQuinta. Now, Pat,
you remember what? Go ahead. I'm sorry, didn't mean to interrupt.
Pat Broker had been in public relations for the LRH office because he was the one that when Hubbard's father passed away, Pat was the one who went and handled all of his father's stuff on behalf of Hubbard and executed the will and all that kind of stuff. And then after that, when he came to LaQuinta, he wanted to be a messenger, so he became a messenger rather than public relations.
Okay. That answered my question I was going to ask, so good.
Okay. All right. All right. So here is a picture of Lois Jury Riesdorf. She's now married. And in the back there, that's Gail with the shoulder-length hair, Gail Riesdorf. And then to the right, holding a drink, that's David Miscavige. He's probably about 17 years old in this picture. And yes, Lois is smoking. And at that time, Miscavige was the traffic messenger, meaning he would go through any of, excuse me.
It's okay.
Okay. He would go through all the traffic that's directed to Hubbard and, see if it's okay or send it back for further information. But
well, let me show. So this was Miscavige. Now I know our viewers are going to want to see a little more up close. So I zoomed in on the photograph here, and there he is right there, so you can see him more up close with his little wispy mustache at 17 years old, right?
Yeah, but and LRH used to.
It's all right. Her dogs are interrupting. Moose and Rocky.
There's a car in front of my house.
I understand.
Okay, so LRH used to call him the kid.
He used to call him the kid?
The kid, yes.
Yeah. That was his nickname. It wasn't DM at that time or anything like that. It was the kid. Get the kid.
Sorry about that. All right.
Okay. You ready to move on?
Yes, let's move on. All right, so here is Steve Irwin and Lois Riesdorf. Now, Steve is someone who I had taken from Clearwater and sent up to the base, up to LaQuinta. And his job ended up as, he was like grounds chief. So his responsibility was to handle all the trees in the grounds. And it was him and Leroy Byron Turner.
Right.
So Leroy Byron, whichever one you want. Anyway, so now go back.
All right.
Okay, as the grounds chief, Steve had gotten, now I was not there. This is what I heard. As soon as I arrived, this is the first story I hear. Steve had gotten a advice from LRH telling him what to do with all the orange trees that lined up along the outside wall of olives. So Steve went and he was to get those little nutrient sticks for the trees.
Mm-hmm.
So he got those and he put them around under all the trees at the outside where the umbrella of the tree is, because that's what the directions said. So the roots go out to as far as the tree's umbrella is, and you put the sticks in there. You hammered them into the ground. So Steve and Leroy did this and sent up a compliance report to Hubbard. Hubbard comes down to do an inspection and check it out, and he's talking to Steve. And then he brings up, so you put them down by the bottom of the tree, right? And Steve's like, no, I put them out by the umbrella of the where the canopy of the tree is.
The branches.
And LRH starts getting mad at him. And Steve's like, well, no, the directions, and the LRH is saying it's supposed to be at the trunk. And Steve's like, no, sir, per these directions here, I'm supposed to put him here. Well, Hubbard got pissed off at him and took a swing at him. And Steve kind of ducked. And the swing of Hubbard's trying to hit at him goes and hits Gale, who's standing right there. And Gale is the messenger on watch at the time. Anyway, so Hubbard yells at Steve, and Steve ends up getting removed and put on as the pot washer over in Palms. I guess
Crazy.
for a flashback. Anyway, and non-compliance, not following what the LRH advice said, but following the directions on the box. Hubbard then goes back to Rifle, and he turns to the two messengers that are with him. One of you guys is shacked up with this fella. Well, Gale had been dating Steve. They weren't shacked up, but they were seeing each other. And so Gale's like, it's me, sir. I'll break up with him right away. So Gale breaks up with Steve. And then she's like, why am I doing this? I really like the guy. Just because he, LRH is mad at him, I shouldn't be breaking up with him. So she goes down and finds him in the pot room and apologizes to him, and they get back together. So that's why I have the next picture is Gale and Steve back together.
And they're still together after all these years.
And they're still together. Yeah. So 40, 50 years later, they're still together. Yeah. So anyway, yeah.
I've never heard that story before, but it goes to show you that's how Hubbard was. It was like my way or the highway. I mean, literally, like the directions say to do this, yet he knows better as to what to do. And if you follow the directions like any normal person, he'd take a swing at you. That's crazy.
Yeah. So anyway, Gale and Steve are still together. Okay. Yeah. Next slide. All right.
Who's that?
That's me. This is what I looked like when I showed up at LaQuinta. And I just showed you who the messengers pretty much were. There are probably a few others that I forget. But so then I show up in April 1977, and that's where Hubbard tells me I'm going to go do a recruitment mission. And so then we go to the next slide.
How old are you there? 77.
I'm 20. I turned 21 in 77. And I turned 21 while I was on the recruitment mission.
Okay. And where's that kitchen at? You're obviously in the kitchen. Where's that at? Do you know?
Yeah. No, I don't know.
Okay. That's fine.
Okay. So I'm going to go on the recruitment mission with Rich Cohen. Rich Cohen is the tall one in this picture. And the next to him is Robert Waldman, or we all called him Waldo.
I couldn't believe it. When I saw these pictures, I was like, I remember Rich Cohen very well. He was a very funny guy. But I go, who's that next to him? And then when I read the caption, because you sent me the pictures, I went, that's Waldo. I said, oh, my God. I mean, he looks so different.
Well, Waldo was one of Rich and my recruits. We recruited him for the Sea Org. He was already a trained auditor. He was actually on the pro circuit as a tennis player. And we recruited him.
Yeah.
So he was one of our recruits. And then the next picture, that's Dan Kuhn with Steve Irwin. Dan Kuhn and Sue Kuhn were, again, recruits from Rich and my mission.
Let me ask you, where did you go on the mission? Just to LA, or did you go around?
No, we went to LA. We borrowed someone's stick shift car and drove it up through San Francisco all the way up to Portland. We hit Martin Samuel's missions in San Francisco area, and Lynn Irons and Davis mission, recruiting, trying to find auditors. And then we went up to Portland and we went out to Sheridan to where the Delphi School is, because that was Martin Samuel's. And this was to recruit auditors that were already trained.
The reason I ask is because wasn't Dan and Sue, weren't they up in Berkeley or like, the San Francisco area? Is that where you met them?
Yeah, they actually happened to be in LA at the time that we recruited them.
All right, now let me ask you this. I'm going to ask you some questions here. So what was your source story? Why were you, what were you telling these people you were recruiting them for?
They were going to get personally trained by LRH. That was our gimmick.
Okay, that was your gimmick. So did you have to have them sign like a confidentiality agreement before you told them that? Or was it just sort of like, oh yeah, come work with L. Ron Hubbard, even though, he was in hiding?
Exactly. And this, Dan was already a class 6 and so was Sue. So, and they were field auditors. We hit up field auditors. And I wrote down some of the names of those that we recruited, because it was Dan and Sue Kuhn, Lyman and Carol Spurlock. Lyman was Karen Black's accountant at the time. Dick Stratman, Pam Holloway, Chuck Holloway, Waldo, Nancy Rhodes.
Chuck Holloway. How about Melanie Murray?
She came later.
Okay.
Yeah. But so Rich and I did this mission, and we weren't getting recruits up there fast enough. Well, people had a life and had to wrap things up.
Yeah, but I would say with that list of people who I know, that was a very successful mission. I mean, geez, these were powerhouse people.
Oh yeah, we did get affluence mission assignment for it, but while we were on the mission, the people weren't arriving fast enough. So Laurel Rock was fired down to be our insurance missionaire to make sure we're not goofing off and that we're actually following our mission orders. And we're like, we've got all these lineups and everything. So yeah, we were like, oh boy, we're in trouble already, but look at our lineup, but they hadn't arrived. So that
what did you think about recruiting? I mean, that was your first time doing it. Was it real easy? Like you could find these people and go, hey, come train with L. Ron Hubbard, and it was very easy to get them to agree?
You know what? I didn't like it because I have my own reservations on how you sign up for something and things would change. And it's not the what you agreed to in the first place. And so, you're given a schedule, you got 10 hours off every night, and you got an hour for each meal. And then suddenly it's a half hour for each meal. And now it's 8 hours at night. And your freedoms were slowly eaten away. And that's why I didn't like recruiting, because I could be promising them one thing, but by the time they get there, who knows what's going to happen.
Let me ask you, I got more questions here. I've never heard this story.
Okay.
I've known Janis for over 40 years. I've never heard this before. Okay, so how did you introduce yourself as one of Hubbard's messengers? I mean, or were you just Janis Gillum?
No, I mean,
or were you Yvonne's daughter? I mean, how did people know you, or did they not know you?
No, they knew I was a Commodore's messenger, and some of them, they would learn that I was Yvonne's daughter, or they'd learn that I was a Commodore's messenger. It would come up in the conversation, I guess, it was funny because on our list, I was going through the list calling people, and I call one person, and then I'm looking, okay, Katie Gillespie, okay, and I call Katie, and Katie's like, Janis, this is Katie, and I'm like, yeah, I know, and she's like, Ron's daughter. I'm like, oh my God, yeah, it didn't click to me. She was a trained auditor, and she was on the list to try and recruit. When my mother set up Celebrity Center, that's who she stayed with, was Katie Gillespie. And that's why Katie knew who I was when I called her trying to recruit her.
Do you remember how long you were out on the mission? Do you remember how long you
were? It was in April, and I was back by mid-May, I guess, because I had my 21st birthday down there. And when I got back, they celebrated it when I got back. And that was a tennis racket and a tennis outfit that I got for my birthday.
Looking very, very dapper, very cool for tennis.
Yeah. Look how slender I was.
Oh, my gosh.
Yeah.
Next
so
one.
Anyway, so we were gone for about a month. Anyway, so then after the mission is over, I come back, and now I go on messenger watches and get grooved in on and that type of thing, because my recruits are now starting to come in, but I was still held responsible for manning up the base, though I'd done it while I was in Clearwater, and now I'd done the mission. It was still my job now to get people in my spare time. When I wasn't on messenger watches, I was working on personnel to bring people to the base.
Which brings up a point that I remember. When you get known for something, they use you over and over again, even if you're doing something else, because I was the same way with Miscavige. I had to get man up Cine, when we were doing movies, or I had to get audio technicians, and I get people up to the ranch in Creston, and I would get them up there. So then next time there was the next project, oh, give it to Mark and he'll take care of it. Meanwhile, I'm doing other things, you know what I mean? So I'm sure it was like that with you.
And that's exactly true, because then later on, I end up with the project, get LRH a cook. I got Sanaa Parman, and then I had to man up Cine.
I didn't know that.
I started having to get people for Cine, get a gaffer, get this, get that. And then I went to the RPF. That's in the next series. And then when I got off the RPF, I'm off now, being sent to Clearwater to find qualified executive resources. So you're right. It's like when people know that you're good at something, you're stuck with it.
And you're 20 years old. So our viewers know you're 20 years old. You're not like, you're barely an adult yet. You know what I mean? It's just...
Right. Well, I turned 21 while I was on that mission.
Okay, but still. Okay. Sorry about that. Anyway, go ahead.
Yeah, so this is a picture in the date packing plant. On the right is Doreen.
That was your
one of the messengers, my sister-in-law. And that back is Mark Ferreira. Everyone just called him Muff. And there's a crude story that goes with that I won't repeat as to how he got that name. And then there's David Wilson, who was in charge of LRH's audio visio. And then you can see Annie there. And so they must have been on watch with Hubbard while he was down in the date packing plant doing some recordings.
Is that Annie facing the camera?
Yeah, that's Annie Rush. At the time, her name was, at that time, it was Annie Rush.
Right.
Yeah. And there's Clarice Barnett, CB. And she's making notes, probably of what the settings are of the mix board or something like that. Okay, so then we come to July, and life is just kind of going on, fixing up the property, messengers, doing different projects and so forth. And then the FBI raids the Guardian's office in the Manor in LA and in the complex, the big blue building.
Also in Washington, D.C. too.
And Washington, D.C., because Mike Meisner, who I'd mentioned in the previous video, had escaped. And he went to the FBI and he blew the whistle on what the Guardian's office was doing with their stealing Xerox paper. So, yeah,
This was
they
the largest
infiltrated.
infiltration of the United States government. They were eventually all convicted and went to prison.
Right. But I believe they had like 2,500 people or something that had all been involved in all this kind of government infiltration. And so, anyway, so it got raided. And when it got raided, what happened was the messengers, we had a car. It was a golden station wagon. And we called it Beauty. And when we'd go on our liberties, we would drive Beauty and go into Palm Desert or Palm Springs and have a good old time. But and Hubbard had his own cars. He had a Cadillac, he had the Jeep, and he had a Dodge Dart. And then, but when it was time for him to leave, he left in the Beauty, in the station wagon, and he went to Sparks. And we will start the next series with him going to Sparks.
Sparks, Nevada, up near Reno.
Yeah. Sorry about the dogs.
That's
Nothing I can
okay.
do at this point, but.
So we just covered 1976, 1977, just at the W base and what was going on. And now Hubbard is taking off because of the raid. And I imagine people were concerned that they were going to come raid Gilman Hot, or sorry, W in LaQuinta as well.
Well, yeah, they'd be off. They'll be looking for Hubbard. And I didn't mention when I arrived, we all had to go through a security course, and we had to get drilled on if a reporter showed up or if someone turned up to serve Hubbard with a subpoena, what to do. And that's part of why we all had fake names, and we had to drill and go through all this kind of stuff for security purposes to keep Hubbard hidden.
Yeah.
And I can go into more of that in the next series.
Okay. Now I have one other question that I thought of. The people that you brought up there, the auditors that came up, did they have, was there a big security clearance at that time, like where they had to get sec checked and their backgrounds looked into and all that, like which later became absolutely necessary?
No.
Oh,
none
wow.
Of that. None of that. I didn't have to deal with any of that. It was just, okay, these are the auditors, and up they go.
Up they go.
They had to be class 6 or above, but there were some class 4s that we slipped through. But and they did start training with Hubbard. Hubbard would go down to Palms, and they were in the basement where the course room was, and he worked with them, and they'd have to submit tapes to him, and they had to redo TRs and that type of thing. So they did get to do some work with Hubbard, but when the raid happened and Hubbard took off to Sparks, as I'd said, the promises or what I'd told these people would happen changed.
Yeah.
Because Hubbard was no longer there training them. And so they became just regular auditors, and some went off and did other things, and, that type of thing.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we'll carry on with the next series on the next Messengers Part 9. This is Part 8, and that'll be coming soon. Yeah. In the meantime, if you're interested, Janis has 2 books, Commoner's Messenger Book 1, A Child Adrift in the Scientology Sea Organization, and that's her with Hubbard on this flagship Apollo. And then this is Book 2, Riding Out the Storms with L. Ron Hubbard. And both books are available on our merchandise site. You just go down, click the store, and you can order autographed copies of the book. In the United States, we can mail them out. So just for people in the United States. But if you're interested in getting the book, you can order them there. Lots of great stories in there from Janis. So please do so. And then we'd also like to ask you, please subscribe to our channel. If you've enjoyed this story, we have lots of content, like I showed you before, on our YouTube channel. And we would really appreciate it if you would subscribe. And if you have any questions about this or anything else, you can always ask us in the comment section. We check them regularly, and we do answer the questions. And then finally, we wanted to say, if you want to donate to our channel, you can buy us a coffee. There's a link in the description down below of the video. Just click on that link, and it tells you how to do it if you want to contribute. The money that we get from that just goes right back into the channel, because we do other things and getting equipment, software, things like that. So anyway, if you want to donate, you can buy us a coffee. And that's what we have on this video. Is there something else you want to say, Janice?
No, as we're sitting here, these stories of things I haven't even said are running through my mind. So I'll have to write them down to remember for next one to throw them in there.
Okay, great. Well, anyway, until next time, we want to thank everybody for watching. We hope you have a great day, and we will see you later. Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.